Hello, this is Dr. Marty Klein with another video quickie. I want to tell you about a couple I started seeing 3 or 4 months ago. She hated her nipples and his back hurt most of the time. Well, I should start this story at the beginning. Jalen and Maria were a couple in their 30s, together almost 4 years. The sex had started out just fine. They found each other attractive, they enjoyed kissing and touching each other, and they desired sex about the same amount. Soon, though, they found themselves wrangling about which position to use for intercourse. It started out as teasing, but eventually it became more like negotiating, and that quickly turned into quarreling. Maria wanted variety in intercourse, including on her hands and knees with Jalen behind her, or standing up, or side to side. Most of all, she wanted to be on her back with Jalen on top of her. I like it when he does me that way, she told me more than once. Jalen, on the other hand, wanted Maria on top of him. He said, I love looking at you during sex. I love playing with your breasts while we do it. And that was the problem. The way Jalen wanted sex the most was the way Maria wanted it the least. And the ways that Maria wanted it were not that interesting to Jalen. And yet, they both liked sex, and they said that they wanted it with each other. So what was going on? So I asked each of them two of my favorite questions. What is it that you like about what you like? And what is it that you dislike about what you dislike? And they surprised each other with their answers. She said, I love feeling you on top of me, all manly and strong, just like when you take me from behind, or when you hold me up when we do it in the shower. Well, he replied, I'm not always in the mood to be so manly. Maybe I'm tired, or I have a lot on my mind, or so having to be all manly can seem like a lot of work. But he continued, I always love you sitting on top of me, acting like you really want it and taking what you want. Not so much pressure for me. So where could they go from there? Well, acknowledging their honesty and their desire for each other, I pushed a little more. What might each of them be trying to avoid with this recurring conflict? Not surprisingly, they both continued hiding crucial information, focusing on side issues that weren't that important. Maria did not want to be on top during intercourse, but didn't really want to talk about why. Instead, she critiqued Jalen for wanting to be on his back. She said, I read 2 articles online. One week she came in and talked about this. I read 2 articles online saying that a man who doesn't want to be on top during sex is rejecting his masculinity. It's like a Freudian thing. That approach was so unhelpful. While Maria kept urging that Jalen get on top of her during sex, Jalen began withdrawing from sex altogether. She thought that he was rejecting her sexually, which made her more self-conscious. She demanded he climb aboard and pound me to prove that he was attracted to her, which made him withdraw from sex even more. At the same time, Jalen insisted more and more that he had a right to be on his back during sex, as he increasingly rejected any request for any other lovemaking position. Well, when their sex life eventually collapsed over this, that's when they came to me for therapy. They were each hurt and angry and confused. Why was the other one making sex so complicated? In my professional experience, when people make sex complicated, there's usually reasons. My job is to find out what those reasons are. That, of course, meant getting Jalen and Maria to talk honestly to each other. So one day I looked at the two of them and I said, either you don't really want to have sex and you won't admit it, or you have reasons for blocking the sex and you won't admit those. Which is it? Well, of course, they each had a reason. Okay, I hate my nipples, Maria said, with a sad look, If I sit on him during sex, they stare him in the face, which is just too embarrassing. She turned to Jalen and she said, and then you want to touch them. You know how you love playing with my boobs, which makes me even more uncomfortable. I had no idea, said Jalen, shaking his head. But what's the problem here? You have great nipples. Ah, great ginormous nipples, you mean, replied Maria. They're huge and dark and ugly. They're such a turnoff. Any kind of sex where you don't see them is a plus for me. Jalen was amazed. So much anguish over something that wasn't a problem for him. In fact, it was a bonus. All her work to manipulate their lovemaking positions had been about hiding her nipples, nipples that he loved to touch and kiss and look at. I wondered if things were more or less symmetrical here, and of course they were. When they had unpacked Nipplegate together, without resolving it, but at least understanding what was going on, Maria asked Jalen if he had anything new to say. Well, he said slowly, you know that my back hurts from that old skiing accident sometimes? Well, it's been getting worse. And getting on top of you and thrusting for a while has become just too uncomfortable. Well, why didn't you just tell me? Maria said. Jalen looked at the floor. He said, come on, it's not very sexy. Plus, I didn't want to worry you. I can move around okay for oral sex and other stuff, but these days, the only way I can really enjoy intercourse is on my back. I can move my hips and my arms, but I think the days of pounding you may be over. Well, at that point, they both had tears in their eyes. It was really poignant. Watching these two nice people realize that they'd been trying to get close by being dishonest and realizing how poorly that works, and dealing with the sexual limitations that life had handed this otherwise vigorous man, and therefore this woman. Indeed, watching Jalen struggle with his limitations certainly put Maria's dislike of her nipples in perspective. She said, you really like those big old dark things? They don't turn you off? Maybe I can relax about it? Well, the mutual secrecy unveiled. They were friends again and lovers again. They could find compromises that worked. You know, I won't say a little communication went a long way. I'll say a lot of communication went a long way. They're back to having sex on a regular basis. They're enjoying it more than they ever have. And they're learning to face life's ups and downs together. Maria has promised not to diagnose Jalen by reading articles online anymore. And that alone would be a big improvement for this couple. Well, I'm Dr. Marty Klein. Thanks for joining me. Hey, I drop one of these little videos every 2 or 3 weeks. So if you want to get pinged when I do, just click the subscribe and the like button down there on your screen, and you'll hear from me when I do. Again, I'm Dr. Marty Klein. Thanks for joining me.